All right, well, then let's get started then. I want to thank everybody for joining us. This is the March meeting of the 2229 Main Street, Oversight Committee. We have an agenda today. The approval, discussion and approval of minutes. I would like to talk about the latest, phase 2 remedial action submittal from DeMaximus and the EPA's response to comments about that. And if we have time to, I also have some slides from the PowerPoint presentation that Bruce gave at the community group meeting on March or was it February 27th. And then we'll have some public comment, board member report and public comment. Did anybody get a chance to review the minutes from last time?
Glanced at them, they look all right. to me.
Okay, I mean, I took a look at them, they look okay. So I move to accept the minutes. Do I hear a second?
Aye.
Okay, great. Thank you, Fred.
And we have to vote.
Okay,
So you need to poll Nick and Ray.
Aye. I'm an aye.
okay,
Thanks.
great. Thank you. Thank you, folks. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is discuss latest site-wide soils and sediments, phase 2 remedial action. This is a 10-page report. Actually, it's a letter memo that DeMaximus sent to Kara, and we get copies of it. And basically what they're saying is how they want to proceed in pre-characterizing the soil under the remaining building slabs. And what they're saying is they can take, for every 30 by 30 foot grid, they can take one sample from each depth and use that to pre-characterize the soil as to whether or not it can be used on site for refill, for fill on site, or whether or not it has to be taken off site. And under each slab. Yep, hang on one second.
Excuse me, you logged out and closed the meeting on this somehow.
Okay, all right.
That happened. We have people that are participating.
Because I'm the host still. So I made him the host and then he closed this. So something you did is you closed your iPad.
So it's not being recorded.
No, it is. I'm still the host. It's upstairs on my computer running. So
Okay,
it's still being recorded and it's still in a meeting session, but I have to work. Right?
Okay.
So we need somebody to be the host, right?
all right.
That's running the
Let me
meeting.
see if I can get back into that thing.
So I need you to try to, I don't know what happened. You must have pushed something and you're not there anymore as the meeting. Okay,
Goes.
Meeting-
sorry about that.
all right.
Something,
Meeting ID, 873. Sorry about this, folks.
Okay.
5504. 4115. Join, all right. It's waiting. Meeting passcode.
253
372, right?
372.
It's connecting.
beautiful.
Okay, host is joined. Okay, but. Oh, I think that's it, right?
I have to go admit you, and then I'm gonna make that the host. So just try not to tell it to go away. Okay, don't click.
All right. The temporary glitch is all,
Yeah.
um. And I take full responsibility. This is my bad. I should be, a little bit more aware of how to deal with these electronics, so. My bad, I feel bad. You guys can kick me off the committee if you want to.
So I only saw part of the site-wide soil phase two. Did that include the same grid as the building E
Yes,
characterization?
it's they're using, the Maximus wants to use the same grid over the entire property, and that includes under the building slabs and, also the courtyard. And that's a 30 by 30 foot grid drilled to, 20 feet with samples taken, every 2 feet. That's exactly what they did with building E. And, also, I have to turn this down
Down the side, yeah.
right here. Yeah. Sorry. All right. So that's what they did with, building E and also, building A now, they pre-characterized the building A sediment and, they determined, what was clean or below, the cleanup limits. And they used that to backfill, the holding basin. So the way, EPA responded to this, this one sample, for every 30 foot, 30 foot by 30 foot grid by saying, it's probably not enough sampling to be able to determine whether that stuff can stay on site or whether it needs to get, removed as hazardous material. And the committee definitely concurs with that. I think that what we should do, is come up with a position statement about that going forward. Because this is how, the Maximus wants to do business, then we need to weigh in on it, I think. And, I propose that we, write up something, just a couple of statements to the effect that, 2229 Main Street Committee, would like to, or recommends, or requests or recommends that, pre-characterization, sampling, should coincide with the guidelines for, the guidelines for a confirmatory sampling, and they're different. The guidelines for confirmatory sampling and for pre-characterization sampling are different. Confirmatory sampling is much more rigorous. More samples are taken. Actually, a couple years ago, the Maximus had us come up to the community trailer up there. And, he gave us, copies of how precisely they want to do their confirmatory sampling. And, I went through all the stuff that I had at home and I can't find, it was basically just 2 sheets of paper. And, it described how they want to do their, confirmatory sampling. And it was like a 5-star for each area. It would, a composite of 5 samples. So
You
as
mean
a,
it's 30 by area, you mean in one of these 30?
yeah, it would be, right, exactly.
5 samples.
It would be 5 samples, 5 composite samples, right? So you can see that that's quite a bit, different than what they're proposing to do, which is, 1 sample.
Confirmatory, do you know if they're gonna dig down for the confirmatory sampling, or is it just scraping?
No, they're gonna dig to 20 feet. So picture,
They go down 20 feet now, right, from,
it's continuous sampling, so they'll drive they have a little geoprobe rig and they'll drive their geoprobe rig. The first sample will be 0 to 2 feet. And then the second sample will be 2 to 4 feet, 4 to 6 feet, 6 to 8, etc., all the way down to 20 feet.
let's see, I imagine that they have there's one place under building E where I think one of the samples shows it's fine down to 2 feet or 6 feet, but it's bad at 10 to 20 feet. I thought confirmatory sampling was you scrape some stuff off and you look at what's left. And that would be the surface. You're exposing.
Right, well, the confirmatory sampling is that once you excavate, then you take what's left, and you do the sampling on what's left.
It's like a Mohs procedure.
But I think what
Cancer,
they're gonna need to do, I think, is to do that confirmatory sampling from the surface down to 20 feet. Let them take a composite sample. So basically, if as I get up here and I look around, so just visualize this room as being 30 feet by 30 feet,
Yeah.
okay? It's not, don't know what the exact dimensions are. So like 30 feet by 30 feet, they set up a grid, and for each 30-foot by 30-foot location, they're gonna drill one hole.
Yeah.
Okay, and that hole is gonna go down to 20 feet.
Yeah.
And there's gonna be sampling every 2 feet. It's called continuous sampling. But, so let's suppose that they drill right here. Okay, and, they can tell, this location is fine, but what about over here? What if they move 10 feet? They're not gonna sample here. What if there's contamination? What about over here?
Yeah.
This could be on the other side of the grid, this could be 20 feet away from that one point. They're not gonna drill here. So they're not gonna know if there's contamination here or over there. The only thing they're gonna know is whether or not there's contamination in this one location that they're gonna drill.
So I wanna
So-
point out that this room is actually about the square footage, the cubic footage that we're talking about.
30 by 30 by 30?
Well, it's like 40 by 20, but yeah.
Okay, so I
It's
mean,
like similar in that if you get a feel for, this is how big we're talking
Yeah.
about. And you're saying that the confirmatory sampling that's listed in the site-wide soils
that's
plan,
it's pre-characterization, they're calling it pre-characterization sampling.
but the confirmatory sampling at the end, they're not. You were saying that
They're
that,
not
they
proposing
don't
to do
have
that
it
right now.
recorded.
Yeah.
We don't have a document with that in it yet.
Right, exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
There was a map we got that showed, the excavation plan. And they were gonna dig down 10 feet in a couple of places where they had samples that showed contamination down at 10 feet, but where they had contamination just in the upper layer, they were just gonna dig the upper layer off and not dig any further. Which makes sense. You wanna remove a minimum amount of dirt, because they're big holes and it's expensive,
Exactly, yeah.
and you can't moving around the room, like you did. You can't, it would be too expensive to drill down 10 feet in each of those locations. So
Well, maybe,
I don't know, compromise might be you drill down to 10 feet on this grid, and maybe you put in some other locations where you only drill down 2 feet. Because that's where you expect most of the contamination on the surface, except where there are places where there was a sump or under building E, there's one place where they go down and.
I think that's gonna be probably the case under each one of the buildings.
Well,
Is it-
there are drain lines underneath the building.
Right.
That need to be dug out, and there are
Right,
pits where there were machines.
right.
That need to be dug out.
And that's what EPA is saying is that they should take a much closer look at the original drawings of the buildings to determine where these things are. So, you know, if they have a leaking, line here, or drain here, and they're over here. Well, I mean, how are they gonna find it over here,
Right.
you know? They're gonna be 15 feet away from it, so that's what EPA is saying. Seems is saying that they need to be a little bit more, specific about, how and where they do their pre-characterization sampling, which is basically what we're saying.
Well, I guess I got a question.
Wouldn't be so
when-
bad if you.
Yeah, go ahead.
in a few spots.
Hang on. Who's
So
talking?
this Ray, so I guess my question is, are there certain areas, and I haven't seen this, noted this anywhere, where there's like, well, we already know this is bad, so we really don't need to do sampling here because we got to do it anyways. You know, like where those pipes are. I mean, you know, we know there's pits and stuff like that. So those are spots. Why do we even have to bother doing a pre-dig if we're gonna know it's contaminated, we gotta do it anyways? And likewise, somewhere that's way over, for example, near Throw Club or something like that, where the likelihood is not as high, where you would be okay with 1 every 30 feet type of, you know, the range is changing depending on what our preconceived notions are of potential risk areas. So 30 might be good in one spot, but another spot we know we have to dig anyways. So why are we digging to determine we already know it's going to be dug?
Okay, so I actually think I have an answer to this, which is that the areas that we're talking about, Ray, are under the foundations of the building where we don't have good characterization and we're not.
Okay.
So I think that's, if there's some, we can't just assume that the drain lines are gonna get, we need to figure out where they are, don't we?
Well, one of EPA's comments about this report that, this memo that, the Maximus is circulating, is that it seemed to EPA that, some of the locations were deliberately, moved away from, where the drain lines are on the old schematic drawings of the buildings. So that's a possibility too, so. But I think the bottom line is they need to do more sampling and we need to come up with a statement, about how we feel about that, going forward. Because don't forget, they did the same thing to building A, and they did a 30 by 30 foot grid. And then they used that information to backfill the holding basin, so. We don't know if they might have missed something. So I think that's why we need more sampling. And I think they need to go back into building A and the holding basin, and they need to do a more thorough sampling of what they've already taken out from building A and moved over to the holding basin. That has to be recharacterized, I think. Because we don't know what they missed. 30 by 30 foot grid could have missed a lot. And then, that stuff winds up in the holding basin, as fill, and people think it's clean. And in fact, it may not be. So, that's my take on it.
Well, and I guess I was misunderstanding totally and haven't run everything in details because I'm flipping back and forth between places. But there's some spots that'll be real hot spots underneath the building, and if we don't get them, you know, it's worse than, you know, some of the locations. So, I mean, we clearly want everything that's underneath there cleared. So does the grid even need to be more than 5 and a 30 by 30 length? On a building like that, because a pit may be 2 feet away from a 5 by 5, because in that room there that you guys are in at the moment, if the pit was, let's say, a 4 by 4 pit with something in it, and you're doing a grid and only 5 points, your likelihood of missing it is probably fairly high. I didn't run any numbers to confirm that, but
Yeah, no, I agree.
Should there be separate sampling for we're doing a grid to see if this soil is dirty and we're following the drain lines and checking along the drain lines? In other words, they've got a map of the drain lines. Do we want them to do sampling specifically at the drain line sites?
The thinking, is, that they don't want to do samples right on the drain line where the drain line used to be. Or if it's still there, they don't want to do it right on the drain line. They want to move, a couple of feet to either side of it to see if the contamination that was in the drain line might have leaked out and migrated along the, under the soil, under the building slab, so. Which I can understand. I think EPA is on board with that.
But maybe what you want then is not a sampling grid based on 30 by 30 foot grid, but is based on 5 feet from the drain line, 10 feet from the drain line.
Okay,
In other words, have your grid based on the drain line maps, not. Now that works for everything except building E, where you're not sure what might have been buried under building E when it was built, because the place was already in production
right,
at that point.
Right.
Whereas the other buildings were built after, before they started actually doing production. So you're not gonna find things that are buried under there to get rid of them the way you might under building E.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so you were saying that you might find that there was something much deeper than building E. Well, that might have been something that was left over
Yeah.
from when it was put there, as opposed to seep down from the top or seep down out from a drain line.
I think that it goes back to what we're saying here is that they need more sampling, but how much more sampling?
Kevin, could I ask, you actually discussed this in your memo about building E. What do you think the right sampling pre-characterization plan should be?
What, so it's a really good question. And I would just say there's a little bit of nuance here that there's, like, for example, when they're talking about the 30-foot grid of geoprobes and they want to go down every 2 feet, that it looks like that's part of their supplemental pre-design investigation.
Right.
They're really trying to figure out like where they want to dig and where the contamination is. And they propose that in part because of what happened at AOI's 8 and 9, where they got surprised and they had to extend out their excavations unexpectedly. Now, that's different from the confirmatory sampling, which is going to be after they dig, then they're going to take samples along the sidewalls to demonstrate that there's no risk. But then there's something else, because I think this characterization, like there's pluses, minuses for how it's going to characterize where they want to dig. But then the other issue is they're proposing to reuse some soil on site. And that's, I think, it's one thing to identify soil that needs to come out, but another thing to say, well, is that sufficient then to reuse some of the soil from these areas that we're digging and put it back on the site somewhere? And just for context, in one of Kara's emails to me, because I think one of the issues that in one of my memos, I had said, we're missing some ideas to how is DeMaximus going to properly characterize the soil to be reused on site so that we all have confidence in it. And Kara said that that EPA has requested this is her email. EPA requested a memo from DeMaximus to detail the proposed procedures to request on-site reuse of site soils. Once they receive that memo, they're going to share it for review and comment. And this was in her email on the 27th. So I think I would look at some of the proposed work that they're doing for the 30-foot grids as like, okay, this is where they want to identify areas that they need to excavate, and if they have to expand the areas.
Basically.
Yeah. And once they get going in the excavation, like I think, from what we all saw in AOI's 8 and 9, like that could change. Like it could get bigger. Like I look at that as like, that's the floor. And it could only, it might go up from there. You know, as they dig, they might find some areas where there's additional contamination. But I think the concern that I have is, well, then if they run into some areas that look, you know, clean, can they reuse that on site? And is the data sufficient to justify that? Given that, like, what I think was pretty evident in building E was there's a lot of variability underneath that building. You know,
Yeah,
some
I don't
samples were
question.
clean, you know, clean relative to some samples that were dirty. And that just doesn't make much sense. Like there were some samples in shallower soils that were kind of clean, and then they had some samples at deeper soils and it was hotter. Well, if, you know, is this coming from above down, you know, and then why is the intermediate samples not, you know, why are they showing up as clean? Is it just an artifact of the sampling? And I think that's the real concern that I have. Like I look at it as, it's one thing to identify soils that should come out, but I look at it as it's a very high bar to reuse soils on site.
So,
And
so I want to clarify, Len is saying that the 30 by 30 for pre-characterization is still not sufficient because there are things that are going to be associated with drain lines, with underground contamination patterns. And you're saying that you're not as concerned about the pre-characterization part of that. The 30 by 30 is probably okay for that, but it's not okay for characterizing soils that are going to be moved around and reused, as opposed to what are going to be left at the site.
I think that's fair in the sense of this 30 by 30 foot grid that they're proposing to do outside of the buildings is a new add-on. And I think it'll be useful data.
But
It's-
but you think that it's sufficient for a
Well,
pre-characterization?
I think it'll identify. I think it's sufficient. Well, I don't know. It depends on what they get from the data a little bit. I do share I share the concern that this may not be, they may not identify all of the areas where there's impacts. Will that then come out when they do their, after the excavate, the confirmatory sampling? The confirmatory sampling might get it and tell them that they have to keep digging. That's exactly what happened at AOIs 8 and 9. So I'll say, I think this is a pretty good way of getting additional data. Ultimately, it may turn out to be fine once they get the confirmatory data afterwards, after they do their digging. And recognizing that, again, it might be an iterative process. They think based on the pre-characterization, they think that this is where they need to dig. Once they dig, they take their confirmatory samples and they may have to expand.
What about this as a possibility that they do their pre-characterization sampling? And then they develop, say, two different soil piles, one where that could be potentially used on site based on the pre-characterization sampling, and one that's clearly contaminated and needs to be taken off site. And then from there, go over to that supposedly clean pile that they plan to reuse and do their confirmatory sampling on that. It'll be taken out of the ground. It'll be in probably in a large stockpile someplace. But let them do their confirmatory sample on that. And then
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Sample the stuff that you think is clean.
yeah,
before you
again, resample it, do a more thorough.
It's
So
been
we're-
stirred up, so.
So
it
we're
doesn't make-
actually kind of agreed here, not that the 30 by 30 foot grid is bad, but that the confirmatories, that the sampling for materials that are going to be reused needs to be much more specific,
Yeah,
more specific. than
exactly.
the 30 foot.
Yeah,
You can't just base it on the pre-characterization information.
right,
Is
exactly.
that
Yeah.
true, Kevin, or did we just dumb out something that
No,
we
no.
were talking?
Well, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. I'll just say there's a couple things to factor in here. So in the 30, imagine, this 30 by 30 foot grid, and they're going to sample every 2 feet. And that works out to one sample every 67 cubic yards. And Bruce mentioned that in the meeting. And that, and he's going to allude that that's a fairly robust sampling characterization program. A lot of times, a typical characterization sample might be 1 every 500 tons. So they're at 1 every 67 cubic yards. That's about every 100 tons. So they may say, look, this is a kind of robust sampling plan. I would say though that the sampling that's done particularly for this type of characterization for on-site reuse needs to account that that's okay if the contamination is homogeneous. Okay, or the cleanliness is homogeneous. Like if you know that, everything is sort of roughly spread out equally throughout the soil, then yes, taking one sample every 100 tons or 67 cubic yards could be fine. I think the issue is going to come up when there's a lot of variability in that data, that you have clean and then dirty and then clean and then dirty, and you don't know, well, is the clean just because we happen to miss something in that interval? And so I could see where it needs to be.
I got the message. Thanks, Terry.
You guys weren't liking what I had to say, I could tell.
No, I don't know what happened. I opened it back up, so now we're recording again, okay? So, what I'm gonna do is just close and stay the host and have it in the background working to the end of your meeting. It can't be too much longer. And we'll solve our IT problems for next time. Okay? So I'm gonna stay the host. Okay, I'm going to just mute myself and be here, and it's recording as of now. Does that make sense?
Folks in the meeting room, you're muted.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, can you hear us now?
Yep, can hear you.
Okay.
Okay.
Do we have anybody else here, Ray? Okay.
Nick, how about you? Can you hear us?
I'm back here. I can hear you fine.
Yes, I can hear you.
Ray and Terry, we've lost.
I'm here.
Terry's here. It's just Ray. Ray? We may have lost Ray.
Ray may have had to step away for a moment too. Tim Rose?
We lost Tim.
No,
I
he's
don't see
there.
Tim.
He's there.
Okay.
Okay.
Tim Rose had his hand up for a while, so when Kevin's finished describing that, the 2-foot sampling only works for homogeneous samples. So you were thinking that there maybe needed to be some other sampling plan besides the grid?
Well, I think really if they want if they want to use that 2-foot and just send soil off site, that's one thing. But if they want to reuse the soil on site where there's potential for contamination to be present, I want to have high confidence in the data. And that's where I think EPA has asked them to put together a plan to document how they're going to demonstrate that. And that could be a few different ways. Instead of for example, instead of just taking one grab sample to characterize that whole 67 cubic foot area, they take multiple composite samples, which would be better representative, more representative if there's variability in the data set. So that's just a possibility. I just don't know exactly, but I think it looks like EPA is looking for clarity on that too.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea. I actually I didn't see that email that Melissa sent, but yeah, but that sounds like what they're looking for. Well, let me ask you this, Kev. So as they're digging along, maybe they've got one truckload of clean material or what they think is clean material, and one truckload of material that's definitely gonna go off site. Then maybe at the end of the day, they take that clean material and stock it someplace. And when they have a large enough pile, take your composite confirmatory sample of that.
Right,
Is that-
that's a possibility. I think that could be, they could propose something like that in their memo. I think we'd have to review it and see, something like that could work.
Okay,
Because I think what they're looking for is something during the excavation, to segregate the soil into clean and dirty, broadly speaking,
right.
that they could reuse some of the clean stuff on site. And is that initial segregation going to be sufficient, or like what you're suggesting, should they do some additional sampling to demonstrate that?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think that efficiency from their own point of view, and how are they gonna be able to do this in the most efficient way possible? And still come up with satisfactory guidelines that this stuff is okay to be used on site. So I guess maybe can we develop an opinion about that and maybe couch it in a way that we could send it to
I thought we
Kara?
just did.
Well, I'd like to come up with a statement, maybe.
You want me to do a draft of that?
Can we come up with something now? That this is our position on this. And it's gonna be our position going forward, but it's also gonna be, our position looking back too, because don't forget, we've got all that building A material, which, may or may not be clean, that was dumped into the holding basin. And the ROD says, well, that should be clean material down to a depth of at least 10 feet. So they basically excavated building A. And based on their pre-characterization, this one sample every 30 by 30 square feet. And they, based on that, on their pre-characterization, they put it into the holding basin. So I think they need to go back and do a better job of characterizing it. And I would say, okay, they've got the holding basin filled. The material's supposed to be clean. Let's do a 5-part confirmatory sample for every, whatever feet in, maybe every 15 to 20 feet in the holding basin. Just go in and do a confirmatory sample, a 5-part composite. So that covers the, what they've already done, but it also covers our position going forward and what we would expect to see. I mean, we can't tell them, all we can do is recommend. It's not gonna be up to us. They can say, it's gonna be up to EPA, basically.
Okay, so we're concerned that the 30-foot sampling grid is not sufficient to identify soils that can be reused as clean soil elsewhere on the site. We would like to see an aggressive 5-part confirmatory sampling plan every, how often, on soil segregation?
Well, I don't wanna get too, let's not get too specific. Let's leave it up to them.
Do we want
I
to
mean-
say the 5-part confirmatory sampling?
No, let's just say confirmatory sampling.
Aggressive confirmatory
Yeah,
sampling.
okay, I like that
Okay.
word. Yeah, aggressive confirmatory sampling.
Sampling on soils segregated for reuse.
Exactly. And also add another comment that we would expect to see this or we would like to see this. I guess we could say that we would expect to see this going forward, but also, in what's already been, excavated and backfilled, meaning, building E and building A too.
But the building A excavation and backfill, right,
They did exactly the same thing.
but that's inside the sarcophagus that they're building there. That's going to
well-
be stabilized with in situ.
Well, I mean, still, if it's, we either get 10 feet of clean material or we don't. And the ROD says we get 10 feet of clean material.
Okay,
So basically, it's gonna be, this approach is what we'd expect to see going forward, but also looking back at building A confirmatory sampling and building E confirmatory sampling. So we're looking at,
building E confirmatory sampling hasn't happened yet.
okay, when
Has
it
it?
does. No, they haven't.
Okay,
Well, they actually have. They've done it. That was the one that I wanted to send comments. But I
Kevin
missed
sent
it.
the
Kevin
but
said,
they haven't done that. That was just the plan.
Well,
Right?
right, they did their I'll say their like pre-designed sampling on that grid and that's what they
Okay.
presented.
Okay.
okay,
So Kevin, you think we should also ask them to be, that's still they haven't segregated the soils yet.
no, but we can kind of jump ahead a little bit and that'll be our position when the time comes to segregate the soils.
But but we're not suggesting that it's particularly a response to the phase 2 soil sampling. We're saying for any soils you segregate to reuse on the site, that we want to see this aggressive confirmatory sampling.
Well, the only soil they're gonna excavate now is under the building slabs plus the courtyard.
Okay,
So those should be included in what we say, our position statement. But like I say, I wanna, I don't think that's enough. I think that we need to look back. And we need to have them revisit that building 8. Fill it into the holding basin. I think that EPA is not in favor of that. Because like you say, the EPA says it's gonna be under under the cap or.
well, that's my feeling
very-
about it too, that
but-
it's
but-
being segregated like.
But then again, what if they really miss something? Okay, what if somehow it impacts future use of the site? Let's find out now. I don't know how much soil they actually use from building A. Maybe 10,000 cubic yards. I mean, it
Yeah,
shouldn't
you're
take,
talking
it
about
shouldn't,
just using one,
it
doing
shouldn't-
1.5.
it shouldn't take them too long to do that.
Okay, so this is the statement I've got so far that we're working on. We're concerned that the 30-foot sampling grid is not sufficient to identify soil.
Call it the 30-foot pre-characterization.
We're concerned that the 30-foot pre-characterization sampling grid is not sufficient to identify.
Should be 30 by 30 foot. 30 by 30,
30 by 30.
yeah.
We are concerned that the 30 by 30-foot pre-characterization sampling grid is not sufficient to identify soils that can be reused as clean soil elsewhere on site.
Okay, good, I like that.
We would like to see aggressive confirmatory sampling on soils segregated for reuse under the building slabs and courtyard. From
Okay.
soils segregated for.
Well,
reuse.
we also
Okay.
wanna have it mentioned about building A in there too.
We would also like to see this confirmatory sampling program applied to soils used to backfill the holding basin.
Okay,
You would think that the filling process would mix up the soils quite a bit, so they could get what would amount to a random sample just by taking bits from the surface.
You would think that there'd be some homogenization, in the, when they
Yeah,
actually
if
backfilled
there
it, yeah.
were a knot of contamination, it would be all mixed up now. It
Right,
wouldn't-
so in that case, it would be, that's actually better.
Yeah, so
if
they
it's-
could, they could get a, they could get a, they could go over the surface and take 500 samples, and it'll be equivalent to taking 500 samples throughout the volume of
In
the,
other words, they wouldn't have to
Material.
remove any of the stuff that they already put in there.
no.
Okay, well, that, I mean, that makes
Get
sense.
Say that again. In the holding basin,
Yeah,
they
Yeah.
need to do what?
Well, we're assuming that, when they backfilled the holding basin, that did, something to homogenize the soil.
Uh-huh.
It helped to homogenize the soil. So now, the soil is, relatively homogenized. And so when you sample in one place, it could be representative of a wider area. So in other words, they wouldn't have to take that many confirmatory samples.
Do we really
Well-
want to spell that out, or do we want to just still say we want them to do the confirmatory sampling?
I don't think I think
they
that
could
should,
work out the.
The
We
details.
let them
haven't- we
work
Okay.
on the
We haven't got
details.
any details on what they mean by confirmatory sampling.
Yeah.
So let me go for this one more time. We're concerned that the 30 by 30-foot pre-characterization sampling under the building slabs and in the courtyard area is not sufficient to identify soils that can be reused as clean soil elsewhere on site. We
Okay,
would like to see aggressive confirmatory sampling on soils segregated for reuse. We would also like to see this confirmatory sampling program applied to soils used to backfill the holding basin.
okay. Okay,
Kevin, do you think there's anything we should be adding or subtracting from that? So Tim Rose hasn't gotten a chance to speak yet. Tim, did you have something you wanted to add to this? You put your hand up a lot. And then it
Yeah,
disappeared.
I didn't know whether we were supposed to wait till questions and things at the end, so I kept
no,
throwing the hand back down.
anybody can chime
But
in.
my
that's fine.
first reaction was, I asked him, how come you picked 30 feet by 30 feet? And he said, well, we just did. And I said, you could make it smaller. He said, it's a matter of cost, obviously. That they did not want. So taking multiple samples within that 30 foot by 30 foot would be the same thing as making a tighter grid, seems to me. I think the people up in our group are quite concerned that they're not going to find things that are there. Again, I don't remember exactly what they did on the building A, taking the soil from that and how they did that and how they confirmed it, if they did any confirmatory samples, but I don't remember any discussion about what the confirmation is going to look like. In other words, how are they going to confirm that soil is good? So what you've written, I think, is fine, but I think Crew is even more towards the side, dig the whole thing out from building E, because as Kevin mentioned, there is such a wide range of type of results they've got from the ones that they've taken so far. I can't imagine that there's going to be anything better coming out of that. If anything, it's just going to be more stuff and different. And we're going to say, well, boy, the chances are of our finding some soil in there that is that clean may not be very good. And it's clearly the case. They just don't want to have to cart that stuff out. But with all the stuff, I don't know what they found under building A, for example. What was there contaminated
There were a
soil in
couple
building
of-
A?
There were a couple of hits for uranium that were segregated and removed,
Removed.
but the stuff that they used for clean fill was all below the cleanup levels. And they didn't find PCBs in that.
So when you say the stuff they used, they had confirmatory results that stuff was clean. So why
No,
do we
that was
need-
just pre-characterization. They
They
didn't,
based it on pre-characterization.
yeah, they based it on pre-characterization.
So they've
and
never
not-
had a confirmatory.
They
testing.
never confirmed it exactly.
That's why we want them to do the confirmatory sampling in the holding
Right.
basin.
Did they do
Yeah,
the 30-foot squares on building A?
They
Yeah.
did. They did. They sent around a sampling diagram of where they took their,
They sent
Their
around
samples.
a 600-page document that describes, that has that information in the appendix.
but we didn't hear about this until after the fact though.
Right.
I-
Of course, the absolute worst situation would be if they take really clean stuff and mix it up with the stuff that's not clean, and that brings it down to below a statutory limit. I mean, I would hate to think we're dealing with people that would be that sinister, that would do that sort of
So-
thing. But the mixing up is, as you mentioned about how that is now a homogeneous material, but presumably if they mix clean with dirty, they also have a lower level than they had when they
So
put
we
it in originally.
So we have this soil reuse statement, but were there other comments on, do we also want to make comments about, working with the drain line map instead of a grid to do sample, to figure out where you're doing your pre-characterization?
To be honest, I think EPA has already picked up on that. Based on their comments about this memo report.
Do we want to support that by saying it?
Do we need to? I'm
Okay.
not sure we need to. I think if, if, EPA says it and then we go and reiterate it, they're probably not gonna listen to us. They're gonna listen to EPA. I don't think.
Yeah, they're not, but they're gonna see that we're supporting that too, so.
I don't think we need to really go into that. If EPA hadn't said it, yeah, definitely, but. I don't think, otherwise, I think we're good.
Kevin, is that what you think you're gonna do with the crew comments for the phase two?
I'm not sure yet.
Okay,
But you already submitted some materials about that, and Tara indicated she was going to include that in their review, and we have not seen that review yet. Is that correct?
that was building E though, that was not the soils under the other buildings, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I think that their comments are due on the 20th. Yeah, I think it's 20th. For the soils under the other buildings plus the courtyard. So we've got and we wanna
That's
attach the statement to that too, Jenny comments. I don't have a whole lot of other comments about that phase two memo.
Did anybody else on our committee have comments about the phase two memo?
No.
Ray? Do we still have lost Ray?
The last Ray?
Okay, well,
All right. So Nick, you're all set with that? No particular
Yeah.
comments about it?
No, I just wanted to check one thing. So they're gonna remove down to 20 feet, that whole area? So,
They're gonna sample down to 20 feet.
right, but how much are they removing? All of it? Down that deep?
It varies, I think.
only when they find stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they're gonna try to be as selective as they can.
So they're gonna leave a lot of the soil in place.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Well, okay, then I'm back to the concern that Len had at the beginning, which is, every one sample every 30 feet is not much, right? It means basically they're gonna sample maybe as much as a cubic yard out of a volume of about 670 cubic yards. That's a pretty
Yeah,
low
I
sample
mean-
rate.
but
Yeah.
there is what to do for pre-characterizing, and there's what to do for actually what you remove, because
Yeah,
as
but
you
what you've
remove
removed
stuff.
is only where you saw problems. I'm more concerned about the areas that you didn't see problems, which is most of the area where you're not looking.
I
Right.
think it was only the deep places that they were going to dig down. I think that.
Well, they
the
only have
map I saw, they were removing 2 feet of soil from almost everything, but digging down further where there was something that had been detected.
Yeah. Yeah, but they're only probing down every 30 feet, which is basically, out of a 900 square foot area, they're looking at about 1 square foot. Right.
So this is based on the idea that there is a source where this stuff came from, and so you will find it in a higher concentration and then a little lower and then a little lower and then a little lower. And so when you get to the point where you found the lowest concentration, you don't really have to look that much further. That's
10
that's
feet,
what
or 10 feet.
doing the kind of confirmatory sampling while they're working showed problems with the two areas that they've done already. And from my perspective, if you're sure that your drain lines are part of the area that you've removed, that since those are the sources under building CD and C and D, that makes sense.
Right.
But
So,
under building E, we're concerned that there was material that was buried there that isn't gonna have this precursor of, you know, where it leaked from to show us the way to it. Does that make sense, Kevin?
Yeah.
So in other words, I think it's probably fine for under building C and D and for, you know, the excavation that they're gonna do, what's left of under the buildings up there. It's just building E that I'm really concerned about, because I don't think that that they know everything that's the source of everything that's down there.
I think your basic thing is right. Like there's a lot of variability in the data underneath building E. And I don't know why it's like that. Like what's the reason behind that? And in the absence of that, like you know, what a conceptual site model is for how that contamination got to those locations. In the absence of something strong like that, I would put less weight on the analytical data, because I don't know if it's just heterogeneities in the subsurface that, you know, they sampled something and it comes back clean, and is that just because they happen to get the one spot in that area that's clean and it's surrounded by contaminated material? I don't know.
Well, they only have to excavate down to 10 feet. Am I right about that?
Well, they only have,
Then
Well,
as they backfill, they're gonna put clean material on top of that,
Right.
but we're gonna have 10 feet of clean fill. Why would they need to excavate down as far as 15 or 20 feet?
so if there were another potential source there that has been covered by a building all this time, is it possible that removing the foundations and digging and putting pervious soil above it could make that source contribute to the water problem there? It's not a problem for you don't have a route for exposure if it's 10 feet below, but you do have a route in the areas that are outside of the holding basin sarcophagus.
So in other words, if
For there to
it's,
be, if you uncovered a new source.
so you're talking about uranium contamination.
I'm talking about uranium, yeah.
That's a good question.
Am I being stupid here, Kevin, and just worrying about something
Yep.
that isn't for real, or?
No,
Could there in fact be a real source for potential water once the covers and the foundations are removed?
sure. Yeah, no, it's a potential concern. Absolutely.
All right, unless anybody has any other comments on this particular topic, I'd kind of like to move on, just,
Okay,
we're getting running a little late here. Just want to have one comment about, the presentation that Bruce had at the trailer on the 27th. He went over the groundwater, let me see if I can find it, well, I'm not sure I can find it, but he listed the influent concentrations coming into that treatment center across the Knox Trail Treatment Center. I wish I could find it here. And I just wanted to make one comment about that.
Everyone's still left in this meeting. Were you actually at the EPA presentation? Or was there somebody who wasn't there?
You're looking for the
I'm-
plume?
You weren't there.
I'm looking for the plume,
Yeah,
yeah,
I saw it in there.
yeah, it is.
It's toward the
But
beginning.
anyway, I'm not gonna look, I'm not gonna look for it. Basically, what it's showing is the concentrations coming into the treatment center, the influent concentrations. And, they go, it starts off at about, it's 2018 or 19. It starts off with about, 10, micrograms per liter. And then now it's down to, I think it's, the last check was 3 point something, 3.1 or 3.2 micrograms per liter. And it's taken a long time to get down there. And I was just thinking that typically what you're gonna see is that the most of it of the no, I want to actually see the numbers, but that's all right. So what you're gonna see basically is that most of the contamination can be removed fairly easily. Is when you get down to the low concentrations, that it's gonna take quite a while to be able to clean that up to record of decision levels. And also too is what you see in the data is there's gonna be some rebound. So I guess I take from that they've got a lot of work left to do on the groundwater yet. And who knows if they'll ever be able to clean it up, but I mean, it will take years, if not decades. So that's all I wanted to say about that. That was a little bit of a shocker. Cause they actually it lower a couple of years ago than it is now. So there was obviously some rebound. Maybe it's contamination that's coming out of the matrix, I don't know, but it's just gonna take a while to be able to get that stuff cleaned up. I think that's a good example of that. So that's all I really wanted to say about that. So moving on. Unless anybody has any other comments about the EPA presentation on the 27th. I'd like to move on to the board member report.
So there's no, they're gonna be planning a couple of meetings, big public hearings for the 2229 task force that this committee will get invited to. But they haven't confirmed up the dates of those yet, so I will get those back to you next time.
Okay, great. How are those folks meeting? Are they actually, coming into a room like this or
Yeah, they're
in-person meetings?
they're
or-
doing a hybrid meetings, although
Hybrid.
over the summer it's gonna be Zoom, so people can do it on vacation.
Okay,
But
all right.
they meet on Tuesday nights at 7 o'clock, either in the select board hearing room or
yeah.
in this room.
Yeah,
And they do it every other week, so
okay,
they just have one this week.
all right. How are they progressing?
It's slow. They're having a hard time getting information from groups about what they want. And they're still waiting for more serious reports from the lawyer. And they've actually hired a group, Rue, to do the risk assessment for the town.
Okay,
And that data
Okay.
isn't back yet, so.
all right. Just out of curiosity, that $20,000 that we were rewarded from Mass DEP, how is that being used?
I think that's being used for the risk assessment.
Okay.
I think we're doing our own money for the lawyer because
Yeah.
it wasn't.
Well, that isn't-
appropriate for
isn't-
that,
isn't-
and we're
isn't
putting-
that-
We're putting a little more of our own. Oh, Terry has an answer to that. No? We're putting our
no,
own money into the lawyer.
yes, I'm agreeing with you, Pam, except I think the committee is progressing really well. It's a very complex issue they have. And Paul is a real slave driver to try to keep them on time to finish by October. And I'm saying, hey, if you don't finish by October and you need an extension, it's all right. But I think they're moving along pretty well. And by June, they're going to have another public hearing where they're going to start giving out preliminary ideas and see what the public thinks. So my question to this committee is, do you guys want to touch base with them? Have a joint meeting or any other thing before their public hearing in June?
No,
Okay, well,
we have a whole lot of documents to review between now and then, Terry.
No
So,
problem.
so I don't think we need to have a joint meeting with them. We can send information back and forth to them, I think.
Yeah, right now, yeah, is there anything you want to send to them, or, do you think you'll need to work with them more in the summer, or is there anything they need to know before doing their report from you guys' point of view?
I think I've been communicating with them when we've had
Mhm.
information that's needed, so.
Right.
I think that, so long as, they can get the minutes from us and, any other attached documents that.
Yeah.
Unless they have any specific questions, Terry, I think that probably should, be as much as we can do for them.
And we've
Okay.
dealt with questions about the institutional controls and the holding basin cap already.
Yep.
That have been related to that, so.
Okay, moving on. Agenda item 6, any public comment at all?
Well,
Tim or Kevin, any public comment?
if I could just add, I really appreciate your due diligence, that long discussion about, the 30-foot grid. It makes me feel really confident that you guys are really keeping an eye on the project and holding their feet to the fire, and I really appreciate that.
Well, I just want to thank EPA because EPA's been, right on top of this. Since, especially since Kara came on board, so, I just want to thank them and their due diligence too. Cause they've come up with things that really we haven't thought of, so. Other than that, anybody else have any final comments? Okay,
I do
great, so, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I do not.
Okay, okay, Pam, we'll get that statement ready. You're gonna write up
Okay.
that statement?
I'll write the statement, I'll hand it to you and you can send it to, or do
Okay,
you want me to just send it to Kara?
we should try to, well, we have until the 20th to get those comments about the phase 2 plan. For pre-characterization, so, what's today? Today's 15th? 16th?
Today's yeah, 15th.
So the 20th would be, is it Wednesday?
I think so.
Wednesday. So let's plan to incorporate the comments into, I don't really have any other comments on that. Kevin, are you planning on submitting comments on the 20th about the phase 2 recharacterization?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, other than that, what we talked about and that, position statement, I don't really have any other comments about that report.
Okay, so I'll write that up and then hand it off to you, or you want me to send it directly to Kara?
It's up to you. I mean, if you
I can
feel,
send it to Kara.
okay,
Okay.
that's fine, that's fine. But we definitely want to do it by the 20th.
I'll get it.
Brad, any final comments at all?
No.
Okay, then I move that we adjourn, and I
Next
want,
meeting is Friday, April 19th at 11 a.m. here.
okay. I will have to, I'm not sure what's coming up as far as reports. We are, I think, pretty good with the 95% holding base in ISS. I don't think we really had any comments about that before, but
Do we have it? When's the deadline for that?
that is gonna be, it's in April. I'm not sure whether it's the 6th, it might be the 6th. But I don't recall that we ever made comments about that anyway, but I'll,
And so you want me to send that to Kara too, that we don't have comments?
let me just run through that again and see if.
So you'll send an information to Kara about that.
Yeah. Okay, anything else before we sign off here? Okay, great, thanks folks for attending and giving input, we appreciate that, and any help you can give us, that's fine. We can use all the help that we can get, thank you.